Welcome to our RaboResearch Food and Ag Reports on Brownfield. I'm anchor reporter Megan Grebner. With us is Steve Nicholson with Rabo. Hello.
Hello, Megan. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about organic production and some of the things, how that relates back to the ag industry. So let's start first and talk a little bit about some of the things that the report looks at.
Sure. And we'll back up a little bit and talk about, we got into this because when we looked at, the U.S.'s organic foods is one of the fastest growing categories in food and agriculture. And then we looked at where's all this organic food coming from? And we focused on corn and soybeans, and 70% of our organic soybeans were being imported, and it was 60% of the corn. And you're thinking, well, we can grow that here. And so I think, why aren't we doing that? So it's kind of how we got into it. And we're not advocating to producers one way or the other, but we want to advocate to them that this is an opportunity to restore profitability of the farm, because as we all well know, the pain in row crop farming is the economics aren't real good at this moment. But the report talks about those opportunities, talks about the cost of making that 3-year transition, which is a very high hurdle for many producers, and the importance of having a strong balance sheet going into it, and then talking about what are the premiums for corn and soybeans primarily, and what are those premiums done, and kind of what does the premiums look like in the future, and also talking about the fact that supply chain for organic is much different than conventional, and I think that, we'll put, or non-organic, I put non-organic so we don't get confused, is that supply chain for organic is very short. Is that you have a lot more what you could call B2B, or producer to end user relationships, where in that conventional chain or non-organic chain is a little bit longer, but we're seeing that happen there as well. So we talk about all those different things in there and what's happening. So it's a very fascinating area, and an area that is getting a lot of attention, in food companies and producer circles, and also in, everyone in the middle too.
Steve, let's get into this a little bit as we take a look at this report, and you take a look at some of the things that you're examining and maybe digging deeper into. Let's start first and talk a little bit about the hurdles. You mentioned a 3-year transition, and that can be a significant barrier for U.S. Grain and oilseed producers. What are some things that producers need to look into?
Yeah, it is a significant hurdle, and I think that's one of the things everyone looks at the premiums and goes, right now it's $5 premium for corn and call it $8 premium for beans, and people go, wow, that's great. And then they start to look at that 3-year transition and the costs, and it's a little daunting. And so let's get some economics, and we'll use some big, broad numbers. But if you started this transition back when prices were higher, 12, 13, 14, and you made that 3-year transition, and you're now, certified, and there's lots of ways to do that, and we can talk about that. It was costing a producer in that 3-year transition about $500 per acre that he was going to lose, or she was going to lose, in that process. So that means you have to have a very strong balance sheet to get through that transition. And once you do that transition, the returns are tremendous. And we can talk specifically about corn and soybeans. I'll get to at the end. But if you're making that transition today, and we'll say in the last couple of years, when we see corn prices in that $3.50, $4 area, and beans, $9 to $10.50 area, that cost for round figures goes to $1,000 per acre for that 3-year transition. So it's a significant cost, again, for the farmer and for his lender to work together to try to figure out the make. Again, the farmer has to have a pretty strong balance sheet going in. But when we look at corn and soybeans, one of the other things that we discovered in this process was that corn was really the big return. Once you're certified organic, those returns on corn are $600, $700, $800, $900 per acre for organic corn. Soybeans is less, $300 to $500 an acre, and more likely $200 to $300. And then that rotation, you have to have a legume, which is can be alfalfa or peas or something like that. And the return on that is not as good. And generally, it seems like the corn subsidizes kind of the rest of that rotation. So that's a really important piece also we discovered going through it.
I know producers, as we talk about economics, they look at the premium side of it, but they also probably are looking at the production side of it as well. What are some things that they have to look at when it comes to yields and looking at those balance sheets there?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you look at, I'm going to take your question a little bit farther too, if you don't mind. But first of all, they have to understand, this is not, you just can't take your conventional brain or non-organic production brain and move it to organic brain. It's a system, and you have to think about it as a system. And one of the most important things going in that I discovered, and we don't get in this paper a lot, but it's a discussion point, is making sure soil health is good. You've got to have a soil that is full, that is really active microbial and can really use the nutrients that you're applying. A lot of it from manure. So that's a really important thing going in. Understand that. I think it's important too that you've got a mentor, someone that can help you, kind of go through this process, because it's not an easy process, and a lot of people really struggle with that. The other thing on the production side is the cost. People, and you said it right up front, people get focused on the premiums and think, wow, $5 premium for corn, $8 for beans. How could anything go wrong? Well, they can, but the other piece of this is, even if, let's say that you don't sell organic, and over time, your yields in an organic system will go up and will be within 85 to 95% of what we would call non-organic yields. And at the same time, your cost of production is lower. So you have a competitive advantage right off the bat once you get into an organic system, where that cost of production is keep you very competitive in the marketplace as far as costs. So that's a piece that I think people forget or forget to think about when they go into organics.
Do we also wonder, or do you also take a look at the increase in organic production here in the U.S. and how that might impact premiums as well in the long run?
Yeah, we do. We have looked at that, and we do see an increase in acreage of organic grain production, across the United States. One of the challenges in doing organic analysis or organic is that there's just so little data available, and the data that is available is a little sparse and a little it doesn't have the track record that we have, like in a USDA supply and demand report or crop production report. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but we do see that we're in a pretty big ramp up on acreage on corn and soybeans right now. So we think that will impact premiums a little bit, but we don't think it's going to be a dramatic decrease from where we are today, because of this barrier to entry, because we think now you may in the next several years not have the people entering organic because the cost is so great, and that barrier of entry won't be there, or that barrier of entry is there to keep kind of keep people away that don't have strong balance sheets. And as we well know, a lot of farmers are, not all farmers, but there's a serious amount of farmers who don't have strong balance sheets will have the ability to go ahead and make this change. So we don't believe that the premiums are just going to, fall off the vine. And a lot of people use the example of dairy. Dairy, everyone got into organic dairy, and that premium and conventional, or non-organic, milk products just, collapsed or converged. Well, they had you have a 6-month transition period there. And then in that transition, you can sell that non-certified organic dairy as either natural or grass-fed or something like that, and still get a premium. In the case of organic grain production, it's not that easy. And so it doesn't, again, it's a huge barrier to entry. So why we think production and the demand for grains continues to grow, in the United States, or organic foods continues to grow.
You talked about the fact that we import a significant amount of organic grain. How does that present an opportunity for U.S. growers to maybe take away some of that market share that's coming to other countries, especially at a time where margins are tight and farmers are looking for ways to boost their bottom line?
Yeah. That's absolutely the opportunity right there. Is that we've seen that already, particularly in corn. If you look just in the last 4 months of monthly organic corn imports in the United States, they've been down dramatically. Soybeans not quite as much, but because the returns on organic corn are so good, that's why we see farmers, adapting or adopting organic corn production very quickly when they can, because the margins are there, and we've seen that drop off. But we should say that the other thing that's happened is that the Inspector General of the U.S. of basically the Agricultural Marketing Service of USDA came out last fall with a report saying that the AMS was not really doing their job looking organic, and there was a lot of concern about the integrity of those products coming from overseas. Were they really organic or not? And so you had kind of two things converge at once: increasing organic production in the United States, and also and now we're starting to see a decrease in imports, which is going to give opportunities for the U.S. farmers to fulfill that demand for organic grain here in the United States. And so we see them doing that, and we think that that'll be very good for them and will provide better profitability, more sustainable profitability of the farm going forward.
We talked a lot about the risk and the opportunity for producers. What about the flip side of that, Steve, as we look at the grain buyers and ultimately the end users?
Yeah, it is a really interesting, we talked a little bit about that supply chain. There is, and we're going to go to the end and look at the end users. Food manufacturers, consumer packaged good companies are really struggled over the last several years because the consumer has gotten much more wanting fresh foods, whether it's food, meats, animal protein products, fruits and vegetables, things like that, dairy, stuff like that. In the middle of that, we kind of joke in the office about the middle of that grocery store is like a no person's land because no one's there. And so the General Mills of the world and Kellogg's have they've invested in organic food products. So we see them becoming more and more demanding of organic grain products. At the same time, when we look at the producer, they're not only the producer of that grain, but I can tell you more than one example where they own an elevator. So they're able to, and also load out, and they have transportation and logistics operations. So they can bring that grain, in the case of corn and soybeans, directly to the end user, or to that next, the next processor up the chain or down the chain. We're going to look at that chain directly and leave that middle, the elevator, the grain handler, the grain merchandiser out of that. And that really is a tremendous, that supply chain has gotten very short and very small. The producers also become the marketer. And this was a discussion we had internally, and I don't know that we've resolved this, but I kind of label the organic farmer a little bit more of a price giver than a price taker. He is able to dictate the price that he wants of that product because there's a good demand for his product out in the marketplace. And if he doesn't get the price he wants, he goes to the next buyer and finds what he needs. So that supply chain has changed, and at the same time, the buyer has had to become much more in tune with what's going on in his organic space, understand it, and understand that it's not, his conventional buying patterns. He has to think differently as well. So it's just a different mindset. It's a system. It is not, there's not all these little pieces or silos that have to be dealt with.
Does that reshape supply chain maybe
Yes.
even offer additional benefits to the producer and ultimately more opportunity for premium?
Absolutely. Because if you're taking people out of the chain, then that just, there's lost inefficiencies being taken out. So I believe in that the organic chain may in some ways lead the conventional chain to learn how to shorten that chain and make it more efficient all the way through, and give the producer a little more of that money if you have it, the chain has been taken away from him or her. And at the same time, it's going to provide maybe a little bit better bargain if you have it for the end user to buy that product at a better value. Also buy it, less handling, less damage, all those things that happen when we handle grain, across a very long supply chain. But I do think it changes. It also changes the producer, as I said, both the producer and the buyer's mentality about who they deal with and how they deal with it. The farmer just doesn't haul it to town and it goes into the marketplace. He has to understand what that buyer wants and deal with that. And I think that also changes their management of their operation. They're not just concerned about the production side. They're concerned, or maybe just the finance. They're concerned about the marketing and the handling and the dealing with that buyer direct. So it's a very interesting, and the farmers I've met in this organic chain are much more entrepreneurial. Not that traditional farmers are not entrepreneurs, but they're very much entrepreneurial business people that you would think about. And I guess we'll do a stereotype of, the Silicon Valley, entrepreneur. And these guys are extremely entrepreneur and very business focused. They're fascinating people.
We know that this transition isn't for everyone, nor can agriculture function on all one side or one or the other. But if a farmer is looking in to make that transition and looking at their balance sheets, what are some things that maybe they need to go through with their checklist or down a checklist with their broker and their lender to see if this is the right fit for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that we said in the paper, and I've been talking to producers, you really have to think about, first of all, the time period. Think not just the 3-year transition, but think 4 to 5 years out and plan accordingly. Don't just, right now, when we're a little bit late, but as soon as harvest is done, farmers plant for, start planning for the next year, but they're not thinking about 19 or 20, they're thinking about 18. The organic farmer, he's thinking about that, or the transition, if he's thinking about the transition, he's got to think about all those years. So literally go through and plan, for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and make realistic costs, make realistic yield expectations. And what does that do? What can, how does that all fall out in your bottom line? And then, dealing with your broker or your end user who may be contracting with you, dealing with your lender, so that you know all those touch points and all those plans, so that everyone's on the same page. I think the bottom line, I think probably the easier I probably should have started with this, is that you've got to plan a lot more detail and a lot more efficiently and a lot longer term than you do right now.
Does the size of the farm matter when you're looking at making this type of transition?
No, it doesn't. But I will tell you that I have seen the farmers that we've talked to, a lot of the farmers we've talked to are multiple thousand acres, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 acre organic grain farms. And from an end user's perspective, it's good if they can go to a certain, a region and get volume and be able to extract that volume out. One of the models we have seen, and I don't like to necessarily call out companies, but Purdue, the chicken folks, have worked very hard to produce organic chickens, and are working in that, and they're still working on what the perfect model is for that. One of the things they've talked about is that they do import organic corn and soybeans from Argentina, and they can go to particular regions of Argentina where that is all organic production, and they can contract a number of farmers at one time and get that done. So I think if we have centers of excellence, if you have it, or centers of organic production, that's better, because people can get the volume they need for their food production, for their food manufacturing and processing. So I don't think it matters, but I think it does help to have the size and the volume available too, because you're dealing with bigger food companies.
Steve, what else do we need to take from this latest RaboResearch report?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Just looking real quickly at this. I think we've hit most of the issues, because certainly costs are important, and we need to talk about that. The only thing that, has probably maybe hurt the imports that we didn't hit was that when we look at the imports and why imports have come down, we talked about, increased production here. We talked about cracking down on the paperwork or the certification coming, but also the fact is the premium has come down. And so that, the premium here in the United States has come down, which has probably made it less attractive to some people to import in the United States. So it's all, this change in imports, or the size of the imports we have had, is really the opportunity for U.S. farmers to, in a sense, cash in and get into this business and get some money. So, and again, restore profitability to the farm. And that's really what this is all about. This is an opportunity to restore profitability, or to put some profitability back in your operation.
It definitely gives U.S. producers, another option and some things to look at and consider to see if it's right for them.
Absolutely. And I think, we wrote this paper not only because of what we saw coming into the United States, but also from the mindset of looking at solutions for producers today. We all know the problems. We all know the gloom and doom, or the low prices, or whatever you want to, put around that. But where are the opportunities for row crop producers in the United States? And we believe that this is an opportunity, not for everybody, but it is an opportunity for some producers out there right now.
Steve, it's been a pleasure. Great information today, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Megan. Good luck with the kids and your husband.
All right. I'm Megan Grebner on Brownfield.